And I think in today's world, it's not easy to always look for the heart, and especially when there are a lot of difficult things around us, personally or locally or internationally. So, on every single level, I think there are a lot of difficulties. But no matter where we are, no matter what we are doing, it is actually interesting to always try to find the positive and to find the heart in everything that we do. Now, as educators, I think it's a very interesting topic because, and in fact, on one of the slides, I've put this talking about the heart and bringing the heart into what we do does not necessarily mean that we are going to be soft and I'm going to say very bland in what we do and very no, I actually think that the heart is also about the truth, the honesty, but it's the compassion that comes with it. So we're going to take this from different perspectives, and we're going to take it step by step. And we're really taking it from the perspective of pedagogy. So, the art of teaching, the way that we communicate, the way that we are transferring knowledge, and how we can enhance that with that focus on heart and the connection of heart and brain. By the way, I have to say, and I'm just going back with an aside before we start. One of my coaches the other day, I can't remember who it was. If I remember, I will give them a shout out. Sent me some very interesting research which is coming out, very interesting for us ladies, because they've actually found that there are neurons and glial cells in the ovaries. So I'm going to leave that with you to go and investigate, but it is pretty amazing, this discovery. And it always reminds me that we are just scratching the surface of what we know about ourselves. And I'm sure through the years, we're going to be discovering much, much more. And remembering that neuroscience is a very progressive science and it's always overturning itself. So, what we think we know today and what everybody is preaching as gospel today, tomorrow, actually, we may be seeing that no, that's not the case. So, I think we always have to go with a little bit of care, a little bit of curiosity, and a lot of sort of openness to the new discoveries. That is an extremely fascinating discovery. So, where are we today? Well, many of you know that I always start with post pandemic. We do have a lot of research, and on a lot of my other presentations, I list out a lot of that research demonstrating the impacts after the pandemic. So, we are coming into a new way of working. We're coming into discovering what do we need to do now at this point in time? Because a lot of things that we were doing in the past, a lot of approaches, methods are not working. And for me, this is the new shift. This is not about me, the teacher, trainer, educator, standing there with my knowledge and delivering as I want to deliver. It's really about me having the expertise, having the knowledge, but then adapting to the learners. And this is the greatest shift today, that we are now adapting. Obviously, in the bigger institutions, universities, schools with bigger groups, it's extremely difficult to do that. And unfortunately, we have a lot of children with ADHD, with learning difficulties. And if these children do not fall into the boxes, unfortunately, they get left behind. Some years ago, we had a collaboration with a foundation in northern Italy. And some of our coaches were volunteering, helping children with learning difficulties. Those children had horrendous problems at school. With our coaches, they started to thrive. And started to thrive at school as well. So it just shows that when you adapt the learning and you come into those children, adults, teenagers, whoever our learners are, we can help them to unleash their potential. And that's what we're doing, and especially from the perspective of professional coaching, adapting pedagogy, adapting the approach to them. But it means that we have to start becoming a lot more flexible, adaptable, and a lot more spontaneous, and really the art of spontaneity with structure. That's the art that we're learning. Definitely compassion is the key throughout all of our conversations. So teachers are dealing with a lot. They're dealing with the administration, they're dealing with the systems, they're dealing with the trauma of learners, they're dealing with their own traumas, they're dealing with well-being. And in spite of that, teachers are adapting intuitively. And I always say that when you come to one of my webinars, you are one of those who is intuitively adapting and adjusting to the circumstances of today. So thank you for being here. And thank you to my coaches as well for being here as well. So here we are. And for me, the umbrella is NeuroHeart education. Now, neuroeducation itself began in the 1990s. And we saw this integration of neuroscience, neuropsychology, psychology into educational approaches. The 1990s are a long, long way away. We're talking about plus 30 years. And now is when we're starting to come together to really integrate it. Now, the one thing that I have been observing since I started this in 2012 is that we're great at the theory, we're great at the research, we're great at regurgitating the research, but actually living it, being it, walking it, doing it in practice is the problematic link. And that's where we fully focus on this. Hermione, we're going to be developing this as we go through the webinar, yes. So with pleasure, as we go through, we're going to be expanding on everything that I'm saying as the introduction. So NeuroHeart education for me is the umbrella, and it really is this connecting in the brain, the heart, the intuition. Now, we said at the beginning that we have this amazing research demonstrating that there are neurons in female ovaries. We know the heart has neurons, the intestines, the gut has neurons, the brain. So we were fully focused on those three major areas as the holistic connector or the holistic system. Now, maybe we're discovering that there's much more to that. And just as a little bit of an introduction, on the left side, you can see the NeuroHeart educational coach. And on the right side, you can see the neurolanguage coach. Now, the similarities are there because both carry the professional coach training, both integrate the neuroscience, the neuropsychology, the emotional intelligence, and both have certain practices, models, and things that we are integrating into the teaching, into pedagogy. But the left side is for all teachers except language. And the right side is specifically for language teachers because we weave the coaching and the neuro into the language learning process. And the key components of the NeuroHeart educational coaching, so for any teachers, for all communication, we really see that we are changing the patterns of communication. We're bringing in the compassion, we're bringing in the structure from coaching. We're bringing in the ethics, the standards from the International Coach Federation. We're incorporating heartfelt conversations. Now, I'm going to touch upon those a little bit later. And we're incorporating the neuroscience. So we are implementing the research, provoking the learner autonomy, stimulating metacognition, and really helping learners to learn how to learn. Just a little bit of background. Sorry, my slides have just jumped. Just a little bit of background. When I've done research on holistic education in the past, this for me jumps out as the most prominent. And it's from a book in the 1990s, authored by Basil Bernstein. And Bernstein actually came up with this teaching approach called sagacious competence. And within that, he highlights 6 perspectives to introduce into education. And for me, this embraces everything that we as NeuroHeart educators want to integrate into the learning process. So the first one is helping our learners to discover their freedom in a psychological sense, their good judgment, their meta learning, so bringing the mirror around to themselves, their capacity, their sociability, let's say their capacity to be social, their capacity to really refine and define their own characters, and the self-knowledge, the emotional development. Now, I do think these are all perspectives that we want to be stimulating in our learners of any topic that they're learning. And when we go back to the ancient Greeks, we really see that the Greeks also had education as this essential component of their identity. And really trying to get people to connect in with themselves through education, through learning. And obviously, all of us know Socratic questioning, Socratic debate to stimulate people to think and to draw out the ideas, to bring out the creativity. One thing I always say, and my coaches will probably smile at this, from what I understand, I'm not sure where the proof is, Socrates used to always bite his lip to stop speaking and to get people to come out with their own ideas. And in many ways, I personally think as a neurolanguage coach, that's what we're doing. We're holding back. We're trying to stimulate them. We're going into silence. We're trying to provoke them with their creative thinking, their ideas coming out. And if we then continue with our journey of holistic education, we cannot leave out Maria Montessori as maybe a pioneer before her time in the 1900s, already at that point, understanding how we learn through the ages and really separating out the early learners from the sort of primary school from then after 7 or 8. And Maria Montessori focused on experiential learning, getting children to play with exploration, repetition, and communication, and really getting children to discover and explore. Adding to that, we have Waldorf or Steiner education, mostly in Germanic countries, I believe. I'm not sure how much across the world Waldorf schools are. I actually remember working in Germany for many, many years. I was working in Germany, and I remember one of my clients was from Steiner education. And it was interesting because when we were working in groups, she was different. Her way of thinking was very different. And it was, for me, it was quite curious how she would go into a deeper thought process than the others in the group. Whether or not it was an impact from this type of education, I don't have the proof, but I definitely felt the difference. And again, Steiner separated out early childhood, primary, and then the 7 or 8 onwards. And again, very focused on experiential, hands-on, creative, playful learning. Hermione, yes, I think Steiner is in key points where the Germanic population have migrated, I would suggest. Would you say? I see you're turning on the camera there. Yes, yes, thank you for that. So I could imagine even in Argentina, there's sort of Steiner rooted education. So here we are today, 21st century, holistic educators. I know that a lot of us are training in a lot of different areas nowadays. I know a lot of our Ukrainian colleagues are training in trauma-informed. A lot of people are doing emotional intelligence courses, neuroscience, neuropsychology. And I do think it's necessary. I think now we're at this point in history where teaching is not just teaching. It really is going beyond. Pre-pandemic, I visited Bolivia and I visited Santa Cruz. And while I was there, I was doing a lot of voluntary talks with teachers in schools. And we actually visited one school, which was from one of the most, I'm going to say, lowly districts of Santa Cruz, a lot of social problems in that district. I remember in the taxi driving, well, I was sitting at the back in the taxi with the lady who was accompanying me, and the taxi floor, it didn't have a floor to the car. So literally, I was watching the road as we were driving to the school. At the school, the teachers were frustrated, angry, burnt out. And we started to talk about compassion. One thing that those teachers were feeling was that the parents weren't helping and the parents were blamed. Now, you can imagine the parents would be blaming the teachers. So there's literally this blame game going on. When you think about it, if I, the teacher, become a coach and I move away from judgment, I move away from blame, and I fully focus on the child and how can I help you, no matter what's happening in your life, no matter what terrible circumstances may be around you, what can we do to help you to move forwards and maybe have that chance in life to do something else? And when they started to change their perspective, they started to change the way they teach. And all of this is about bringing in different perspectives and bringing in more flexibility, adaptability, tolerance, no judgment, etc. Now, when we look at the NeuroHeart education philosophy, we are looking at, firstly, every single brain is different. We know this from the research. I always say it's a fascinating fact to think that each and every one of us, the genetic part of our brain is totally different. Plus, what each of every one of us have lived, experienced, and learned has been or is going to be totally different to anybody else. So as an educator, I have to understand that every person in front of me may have a totally different perspective of life, totally different way of receiving information and interpreting information. Secondly, we also have to understand this connection, the connection of brain, heart, gut, intuition, emotion, thinking. And the question there is, how do we then come into this all-encompassing approach? One of the ways is to really adopt professional coaching as the way to communicate. Now, I hear a lot of people say to me, oh, coaching is easy. From the outside, it may look easy, but when you start to train as a professional coach, it's not. And I can see some of our coaches agreeing with me here that it's not easy. When you add to that the knowledge about how the brain functions, learns, and reacts, you learn also how to communicate that with your learner. And this is where you open up that communication challenge and you have these compassionate conversations and you open up and share knowledge about the brain, about the way we learn, about emotional triggers, psychological safety. Because if we do not have a learner feeling psychologically safe, they are not going to learn. So for me, that is absolutely the key to everything that we do. At the same time, we have to understand how to help them with their motivation, with their commitment. We also have to adapt to maybe their different learning preferences. We have to help them to take back the ownership, to become autonomous, and at the same time provoke and stimulate those connections, applying the emotional intelligence and the heart intelligence along the way. I do feel that this means that we have to become much more sensitive, much more aware on a very deeper level as we work with learners. And really sensing what's happening. You know, I'm sort of looking at the people I can see, and constantly I'm reading for signals. What's happening with you? Are you with me? Are you not? Are you switching off? Are you coming back? Can we become more sensitive? Simona, it's a good question. Personally, I think we can become anything we want to be in life. And if we think about neuroplasticity, if we think about change, if we think about the research demonstrating how we can change and the proof that, yes, we can change our brains, we can change structurally and functionally, I'm going to say, yes, we can. On the other side, I do think some people are more sensitive, or let's say more receptive to signals than others. And there is research demonstrating that people who have gone through childhood trauma actually grow up to be, well, to have heightened sensitivity. So, Simona, I'm going to say some people may develop it through childhood, through life experience. Other people actually may go into that training. And after 20 something years of professional coaching, I do think with the experience of coaching, you do learn to become much more sensitive, or at least to start picking up the signals much more. You start noticing the flinches or the very deeper levels. And in a minute, we're going to talk about emotional contagion, because on a very deep subconscious level, each and every one of us, we're picking up signals. The point is whether we listen to them or not. I remember many, many years ago when I started my coach training, there was one particular coaching training which was called intuitive coaching. And I was fascinated what this was going to be about. By the way, I trained with David Rock and his method of coaching. Now it's called neuro leadership. In those days, 20 something years ago, it was called results systems coaching. And one of the training was intuitive coaching. And I was with Richard and Rachel as my trainers. And that was when I understood one very important thing about me. I was very, very frustrated in life that some people seem to see things, hear things. I didn't. In that particular training, I then learned that I actually feel things in my gut. I'm a sentient. I'm not a seer or a listener. I'm a sentient. And from that point on, understanding that really helped me to understand when I've got a gut feeling to stop and feel, what am I feeling? What's coming up for me? Now, if any of you are interested to develop this a little bit more, I'm actually going to put in the chat box. I'm not a Gestalt coach, but Gestalt coaching actually goes into somatic. By the way, let's bring in another question mark. We're now moving into research, which is questioning whether memories are only formed in the brain or whether they're formed in the body as well.
Body as well.
Holger, yes, absolutely. You know, we know this intuitively. Olga, I can hear you.
Wow.
Good morning, Olga.
Hello. Yeah, can you see it? Hello. What is the price? Sorry from Japanese.
It's okay. No, don't worry. It's beautiful to hear you. And you're right. You're right. So, The Body Keeps the Score is the book, and the author is Bessel van der Kolk. He was actually one of our guests at the 2022 conference. We still have his recording actually in our libraries. So yes, this is where we're going. The somatic dimension is something that we're starting to understand now, only now. So let's go into a different direction first. What makes us human? Well, there are certain physiological aspects which make us human. And by the way, in the age of AI, it's good to remind ourselves of what makes us human. Remembering as well that we have this discourse of the two dimensions, brain and mind. So the neuro or the psycho. Remembering as well prominent distinctions like blushing. We're the only ones that can blush. We're also storytelling animals. So we really are able to communicate through stories, anecdotes, and that distinguishes us, obviously. Oh, I had another slide and I must have lost it last night no, there it is. Sorry, I jumped it. Episodic memory, the formation of episodic memory, the awareness of our mortality, conscious choices. We're not just rational, we're emotional, we're social. Matthew Lieberman, leading neuroscientist in that area. We're also very much influenced by our environment. And above all, we have the capacity to think ahead, to prospect, to imagine the future. Now, these are key points that distinguish us as humans. So how can we step on the human touch? Well, we're going to explore a little bit now. We're going to go into that practical side of, well, how do we bring in more compassion? How do we bring in more awareness and about the brain, but also more heart? And that's where we're going to go first. We're going to go into the heart first. What does it mean? This is how I started today. People often think that having more heart means that you're just kind and caring. Actually, I do think it's about being much more connected on a deeper level. And it's about sensitivity, picking up those signals. It's about adapting the environment to that learner. It's about opening up the conversation, and it's about being very honest and truthful. Simona, is it possible online? I'm going to say yes, absolutely. I work with a lot of people online. And in fact, some time ago, I saw David Rock talking also about this. When you're working online, you've got people's full attention normally. When you're sort of in an environment, people may get distracted with what's going around. And when you're working online, you can normally detect when you don't have people's full attention. And maybe that's when you can be honest and say, hey, I'm sensing maybe you need a break. What do you need at this point? How can we make our learning effective? Because I'm sensing I'm losing you. What do you need for us to keep going with that full presence? Ollie, yes, it is a paradox. It really is. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about electromagnetic fields. I'm not sure so much. Well, I can imagine that sitting with somebody, you're going to be detecting much more that electromagnetic field than when you're sitting in front of a computer and you're contaminated with all sorts of Wi-Fi around you. I'm not picking up maybe fields, but I'm picking up other things. So it's about presence. It's about our relationship. And Richard Boyatzis very much talks about these resonant relationships. And for me, that's what you are as the teacher, trainer, educator, coach. It's about the deeper listening. It's about focusing on the human being in front of me, not only about what you're learning, but also who are you shaping to be? Who are you becoming? And it's also about the vision, the purpose of the learner. How can I help you keep coming in and connecting in to that vision? Back in 1991, Dr. Armour was the first to discover that the brain actually does have a nucleus of neurons in it. And this was the first time that we could really see that heart is not just a pump. It's not just pumping blood around the body. It's much more than that. And there are more signals going from the heart to the brain than the brain to the heart. Lucian, good morning. Beautiful to see you and see that you're here. Presence brings presence. If you as a coach are fully present, then you force your learner into presence. Absolutely. Absolutely. And here I think we come back to the meta. And the meta is bringing us into the moment. You know, we always talk about living the now. In many ways, that's what you are doing when you come into this coaching approach. You're coming into the mindfulness of the moment. Now, when we think about heart research, I recommend all of you to go and have a look at Heart Math Institute. Heart Math, Roland McCraty, the head of Heart Math, has dedicated many, many years to researching how the heart and heart patterns or communication activity influences our cognitive and our emotional function. So do have a look at the way that they talk about brain-heart coherence. By the way, you can even get measuring devices to measure the coherence of heart and brain. The more coherent the brain and heart rhythms activity are, the more fully focused, present, calm, in the right state for learning you are. And that's what we are looking for as educators. When we are stressed, we then move into erratic heart rhythm. And we move into uncoordinated patterns of signals. When that is happening, so if we go into that incoherence, it can limit the ability to think clearly, to remember to learn, to rationalize, to make decisions, etc. So again, the question is, how do we move people out of that stress into the calm? Lucian, yes, there are some brain heart coherence meditations. There are also on YouTube some videos with frequencies to get us into that brain heart coherence as well. When we move into the more positive emotional states, this facilitates cognitive functioning. And it also brings us into that emotional stability. So learning capacity is increased. Always key. And a little bit of that research on heart-brain coherence. This was an interesting one, where they were investigating the effect of heart-brain coherence techniques on English as a foreign language learners, reading anxiety and comprehension. They were trained to use self-regulated emotional techniques from HeartMath. And the findings actually did show that increased coherence reduced reading anxiety, and that improved their attention, their memory, their comprehension, and their learning efficiency. So beautiful research actually demonstrating what we were saying about heart-brain coherence. Now, there is a quick coherence technique that you can find on the internet. And as I say, I do invite all of you to go and have a look at HeartMath, have a look at their videos on YouTube. And one thing that you can do, especially with children, is to bring that focus and attention to the heart. So you focus on the area of the heart, you get the breathing flowing in and out of that area. You ask them to slow the breathing down, to go deeper with the breathing. By the way, let's get a little bit technical here. Breathing instantly affects the electricity of the brain. So when you go into slower and deeper breathing, you are actually impacting the electrical impulses, therefore the brain waves as well. Once you've got into that space of breathing into the heart, you then move into experiencing a feeling of appreciation or care for something or somebody in your life. So you bring in maybe gratitude, appreciation, somebody you love, and that will move you into a coherent state. Maria, could this be useful for a coachee with synaglossophobia? Absolutely. I would check in with the coachee, as I'm sure you would do anyway. Just asking how open they would be to just try a couple of, or maybe you give them a choice of techniques to try to just calm them down before starting the session with you. Many of you know the story of me being terrified of flying and training myself by getting on a plane and going into these deep breathing meditative states. And after about 6 months of doing this every time, at that point in my life, I was commuting between Germany and Italy every week. I had to get on the plane. So I trained myself to go into deep breathing, focusing in, calming down. After about 6 months, getting on a plane was like getting on a bus. And that's the key point. How do you normalize an activity for the brain? Because once it becomes normal and habit, the brain is fine. And that's going to be the same for your learners. At what point will your brain normalize speaking this foreign language? Because if your brain thinks it's normal to just go from one to the other, you won't get any nervousness. You won't get the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. But techniques can be useful, definitely. Now, let's move into empathy and compassion, because there is a lot of confusion here between empathy and compassion. Sarah, thank you for asking if you would get the slides. Actually, you will get the recording and you'll be able to see the recording and the slides on the recording. So hopefully that helps. Now, empathy and compassion. I really, really think we need to distinguish these, because everybody says to be a good coach, you need to be empathetic. To be a good teacher, you need to be empathetic. You are already empathetic as teachers. You have great empathy. When you talk about the neuroscience of empathy, the areas of the brain that are lighting up are the pain and reward area and mirror neurons. I feel what you feel. Now, the problem with that is if I'm reacting to your feelings and I'm feeling bad, it's coming onto me and we're not getting anywhere. Compassion is the second step after empathy. And compassion really is the desire to move into action. From the neuroscience, the area of the brain that's lighting up when we go into that compassionate approach, it's called the periaqueductal gray, sitting in the reptilian part of the brain. And actually, it's next to the vagus nerve. So it triggers the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is wandering, that's why it's called vagus, all through the body. It connects all of the major organs. It follows the oxytocin networks. They call it the love circuit. When you move into compassion, step one, I feel what you feel. I'm really sorry about it. Step two, how can we move you on from this? What needs to happen to change the way that you're feeling? So compassion is action. And that's why compassionate conversations are key, because you're recognizing how they feel, but then you're helping them to move the focus into solution. It's a solution-orientated conversation. Now, here from the research, we see compassion involves the recognition. It involves you feeling moved, yes. It involves appraising that situation, but then it involves the motivation to act and driving into actions, motivation, moving them on. And that's the key point. Now let's go into the other topic, which is what we were touching upon earlier, emotional contagion and limbic resonance. This is real. It really is. We really are connecting with each other on a very deep subconscious level. Now, it was back in 1993 that we saw the first research coming out about emotional contagion and how we do subconsciously pick up, we sense And I think this is what we were saying earlier. Simona, you had the question, can we become more sensitive? Well, we really are detecting, but then it's how we are acting on what we are detecting. Do we move into action or not? Are we capable of sensing what we are picking up or not? Now, we also know from research, we have a lot of research about the brainwave synchronicity nowadays. Since 2017, we have research demonstrating that we do synchronize brain waves when we communicate with somebody and we're getting on with them. In our language, we say we're on the same wavelength. From the neuroscience perspective, now we know the proof. Yes, we are. We go onto the same wavelength. And we've got research demonstrating orchestra, audience, brainwave synchronization. We've even got research from 2018 in a chemistry class where teacher and students with each other, the ones that were synchronizing the brainwaves with each other were the ones who were much more engaged. And also from the research, we know that mirror neurons and the limbic region, which is where we are subconsciously picking this up, are key for the empathy, the trust, and the bonding. Now, I actually do have a theory that when you go into that resonant relationship as a coach, you go into a deeper bond with that learner. I'm not talking about uh, falling in love or anything to do with that type of emotion. I'm talking about the genuine, authentic connection with another human. I personally think, and one day hopefully we can prove this, there is more oxytocin released when you are learning in that type of resonant relationship. More oxytocin, more dopamine, more endorphins, more impactful learning. And this is where we go into authenticity. And again, I'm coming back to this point that when you're bringing in more heart, it's not about just being kind and caring. It's about being honest and authentic and real. And here we can see as well from the research that, yes, authenticity is one of the emotional keys to connection. And from the research, we see that authentic emotional expressions do actually impact much more than artificial or ambiguous signals. And again, on a deeper level, I think we can detect authentic from artificial. And this is where AI will never, I'm going to say hopefully, never be able to replace us. Now, we also have research saying that this limbic resonance actually does suggest that we go into that more authentic human connection. And that then is promoting this emotional trust regulation between learner and coach, teacher, trainer. More research as well, we see that we can detect authentic laughter from artificial laughter. Again, authenticity. And even tone of voice, we can detect authentic information, messages. So authenticity is key. And I'm going to take this into a slightly I don't know how to use the word or which word to use, but I want to take it into a slightly, I'm very careful with my words here. I don't want to criticize us as teachers, but sometimes as a teacher, we take on a teacher persona. We change our tone of voice, the way that we act. We put on a show. That for me then is something that our learners don't resonate with. But when you stop putting on the show, when you become you, authentic you transferring that knowledge, transferring your expertise, that for me is when they start to connect with you on a deeper level because they know that you're not putting on a show, you're not putting on a voice. Even as children, I think we just need to be our authentic selves, not putting on the voice, not putting on the show. You can see I was very careful there, everybody. I didn't want to go into, I mean, I've done it before as well. You know, when you kind of stand up and you're putting on the teacher show. I think that's where now we're sorting out the the wheat from the chaff, let me say. And by the way, some teachers actually do connect with that. It becomes their way of being. And sometimes it's how we can go back to being our normal selves. So let's put this together. We've got empathy, authenticity, and heart brain coherence in learning. That's when you're creating this resonant learning environment. And again, I've brought out some of the research, which is showing how learners feel accepted, psychologically safe, respected. We then can start to understand and respond to their needs much, much more. We're attuning on a deeper level. And when we get them into this coherent heart brain rhythms, they then come into more emotional self-regulation, more focus, more attention. And also we help them to promote resilience. We help them to understand themselves. So compassionate conversations, we're going to move a little bit into this heartfelt space. What types of heart conversations can we bring out? I'm always fascinated with this part of the body because it is actually the sac that surrounds and protects the heart. Now, some of the philosophies talk about the fact that this is one of the first parts of the body to actually be formed in the embryo. That is not true, although some of the ancient philosophies talk about the importance of the pericardium. Why have I chosen this? Because actually, for me, it's about this communication with the brain and how the heart is communicating through the neural pathways, through the mechanical information, through the hormones, and also through the electromagnetics. And our types of conversations, the prefix peri for me is the key because we're talking about perfect learning state, we're talking about peripheral communication, and we're also talking about perspective conversations. Firstly, the perfect learning state is how we then get them into that perfect learning state. And as neurolanguage coaches, NeuroHeart educators, we do actually have a coaching model, which is PACT PQC, which helps us go into that communication when we are transferring knowledge. But around everything that we do, we also need to understand how to bring out conversations around the peripheral of our learners' lives. Because our learners come in with their own problems. And we may need to understand what is impacting the learning from other perspectives. Are there problems at home? I'm really sorry. How can we help you to focus into the learning in spite of what's happening? Are they overworked? Many of our learners, corporate clients coming in, they don't have the brain capacity to sit and learn because they're so overloaded with work. How do we help them come into that calm space just for 1 hour? How do we come into cost-effective learning? Maybe there are relationships, maybe there are influences around them. Maybe they have a question with time management, with health. Maybe there's a question of work-life balance or stress. Now, as a coach, we're not going into psychotherapy therapy, but we are trying to troubleshoot what's impacting the learning. So having that capacity to go into that peripheral communication is key. At the same time, we're also helping our learners to bring in different perspectives. And that means helping them to think out of the box, helping them to go beyond judgments, beyond their initial habits or thoughts, and really challenging them gently and with permission. May I challenge you on that? May I stretch you a little bit there? And trying to get them to increase that capacity to go into alternative thinking. So the way that we ask our questions should be a little bit provocative to help them explore new avenues, new ways. Ollie, I love how you take on board this word game and this syllables and prefixes and suffixes. And yes, permission is absolutely key in non-directive coaching. So those are the types of conversations. Now, obviously, as a coach, you learn to have those from a very skilled perspective. And our communication then starts to become entrenched with meta self-awareness, bringing their awareness, the consciousness, the compassion. And coaching conversations, definitely it's about going deeper into the silence, into the deeper listening. We talk about 7 levels of listening. Positive feedback, powerful, open questions to stimulate and provoke. Signposting, accompanying them so they drive, they are autonomous, we are the GPS. And at the same time, provoking. Now, in language learning, we're provoking the scaffolding through the native language, through the languages that they know. With other topics, for example, chemistry, we're trying to promote the scaffolding from maybe daily life. Let's talk about chlorine, everybody. Where do you find chlorine in your daily life? Let's talk about it. How many of you go to the swimming pool? How many of you get out the bottle of bleach? So things like that are going to connect and help learners to scaffold, and we have to be the maestros to provoke all the way through. Let's move into a little bit of a practical focus on how do we incorporate some of these heart steps. Firstly, we can get them to connect in with their stories, their emotions. What's coming up for them? What are the anecdotes in their lives? And also talk about research, talking about emotional intelligence, metacognition, and how much that can greatly help learners to improve motivation, performance, and results. Secondly, we're trying to help them to bring in the trust and authentic relationship with us. We can talk about this with them. What do they need to feel safe with us? How can we help them with that psychological safety? Also exploring their vision, their motivation. And talking about the fact that, when we have that deeper relationship, we know that it's also going to help you to learn. It's going to help you to change. Third step, talking to our learners about what they need to feel safe to express themselves in a different language, or to share information with us, to have the courage not to feel bad about the learning process. And that means as well, we're going into a deeper listening. We're reflecting back. We're bringing in reformulations, clarification, signposting. And we're giving them choices. We're giving back the autonomy. We're not going to do so much for them. And if your learner protests, if they say, well, you're the teacher, you tell me, I would bring out the research and say, we know from the research, the more that you take command, control, the reins, the better you're going to learn, the more impacting the learning for you. And then going into feedback. How do you want me to give you feedback? How do you want me to correct you? Going into goal settings together, where we are co-creating their process. Going into the creation of materials together, co-creating the materials. So we stop preparing. We actually do it with them. Terence Doyle, my favorite mantra in the neuroscience, the one who does the learning is the one who is doing the work. The one who does the work is the one who is doing the learning. It really is true. We have to stop doing it for them and get them to take back. Take back their process of learning. Also, I think it's about us demonstrating our vulnerabilities. So being authentic means also sharing if you don't know something. I remember even as a native, many times I would put my hands up when I had a C2 level learner saying or asking me something, and I had to put my hands up and say, oh, that's really interesting. Do you know, I don't know. Even as a native, I'm going to have to go away and look at that. I always say if a lawyer can say, I don't know, I need to go and look that up, so can we. So being human also means sharing that we're not a walking encyclopedia. And talk about our vulnerabilities as well and get them to open up and share theirs. And at the same time, help them to bring out more and more positivity. Positive psychology goes into this in depth, but helping them to go into positive feedback, helping them to go into self-feedback, but focusing on the positive. What did you do well? What worked? And then what would you change if you could do it again? So getting them into positivity and possibility of change. And finally, I do think it's about being the role model. So sometimes it really is not about telling or saying. It is just about being and demonstrating. And when you are positive, when you are oozing the optimism, people are picking it up around you. And they start to also want what you are oozing out. And that for me, again, is that emotional contagion. When you are the positive and the ripple effect then kicks in. It really does. So we could talk about this in a framework. When you're with your learners, you could think about 4 steps. You could think about preparing the physiology, and that goes into the breathing, regulating their stress, and the brain-heart coherence. You could think about then the next step, activating the heart, bringing out the feelings of gratitude, compassion, care, vision. Then you can think about connection, belonging, sharing, contributing. Then you can go into the engaging of the brain. So perhaps when we're starting a session with a learner, we might even check in on each of those levels, on the somatic, on the emotional, on the relational, and then on the cognitive. No more sage on the stage, no more teacher pleasing. We don't want our learners to just sit there and please us. No more judgment from me as an educator. No more negativity. Really moving into relevance for the learner, movement, focusing on the somatic, focusing on the meta, bringing in much more experiential and more heart. And then I personally witness time and time again with my learners, and I know our coaches do as well, we get a much faster learning process, much more effective, much more sustainable learning, impactful learning, more insights, creativity with the language, with the learning, and also learners that are loving the process. We're bringing back the joy to learning, and I think this is the key. So we've been rolling for just over an hour now. Time for me to start wrapping up. I often finish with this because it is about the joyful discovery, the playful creation, the flowing performance, and bringing back the joy to learning. So thank you everybody for being here. Some of our new language coaches are here. Thank you for that. Elsa is helping me with the certificate. If you would like a certificate, please do connect into that message and send us a request. If you're thinking about becoming a neurolanguage coach, we have since 2012, we've been training our neurolanguage coaching accredited coach program. So we've got 14 years under our belt here, and I'm going to say that it really has been an evolution, and we are evolving. And we're evolving because we're adapting to the circumstances of today. There is a community now of just over 2,000 neurolanguage coaches across the world, present in 85 different countries, an amazing network. I have never in my life experienced a network which is so full of heart. And in fact, you can see on this photograph, we've just had our conference in May. Maria, yes, you're there. Ollie, yes, you're there. We've just had our conference with about 120 of our coaches coming together and non-coaches as well. So we welcome everybody to our conferences as we do to our webinars. And it was an amazing, amazing experience of sharing and developing. So if you are interested and you'd like a first step, there is in fact a free e-course. And this e-course talks about the way that we communicate. So you can download that e-course easily. And if you do download the e-course, you do qualify for a 10% discount for all of our courses. And we have some courses coming up. In fact, if you're ready to take the jump, next week we have one starting, which is a morning course. And then on the 17th, an evening course. And we have a weekend course with Juan Carlos, who's over in Peru, for those of you who are on the other side of the earth. And I'm actually going to be doing a face-to-face in Sitges near Barcelona in August, if any of you are interested to join us for that. So at this point, and thank you for your beautiful messages coming out there, at this point I'd like to open up the space to you. And if you would like to ask questions, share anything, any comments, with pleasure, please do. As I stop the share there. Oh, it's so nice to see human faces and hearts from Ollie and from all of you. Any questions or comments, everybody?
I have one, if I may. So,
Yes, with pleasure. Olga. Hi, Olga.
yeah, I was just curious. I didn't manage to text my question in the chat bot. When you were saying like actually you had doubts as for the correlation of language learning, teaching, and oxytocin, and why you're doubtful about that, because it seems like to be obvious that in that interaction we do have that contribution to each other.
Yeah. I don't doubt it. What I want is to prove it.
Mm-hmm. And why has
So,
it been proved? Just.
I haven't found any research proving it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if anybody has actually researched this. I know Boyatzis, they have done some sort of research on, the compassionate conversations, but I'm not quite sure to the depth of the chemistry. I think we can see there are more endorphins and more dopamine. I'm not sure if we really can prove the increase of oxytocin in those resonant relationships. We see it with the bond of mother-child.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see more proof of it with learner coach. But I'm actually wanting to see more with learner coach than learner teacher. That's where I want the proof to be. And maybe if I, as I move forward with research, we could start to see how we can set up some research on that to prove it. Definitely.
Is there any proof or evidence as for the relation between like in work or social environments? Just I'm really curious, why do we need to really set aside like the learning sphere, like coach and a learner, or we might relate it to a work environment, social environments, and it will work the same?
We can, honestly, it's in all walks of life. And I'm not going to go there, everybody, but there is also research about oxytocin release during, I'm going to blush here. You're going to see me as a human, sex. And I'm not going any further. Okay, so we'll leave it at that because otherwise you're going to get me blushing. But yes, oxytocin release. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's that bonding chemical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
You
you
just
can,
want to see that specific research, right, about teaching and learning.
for me, it's that specific proof of the difference between that educator who goes into that deeper space of a resonant relationship with a deeper connection, which is full of that authenticity, compassion, going beyond the normal teacher.
Okay, so
I
it's
mean,
like okay, now I got your
yes,
point.
yes. For me, it's that comparison. Now, I'm going to say none of you are in that conservative, traditional teacher box that some of us grew up with.
Mhm.
None of you here. And we're totally moving away from that. But I remember teachers, with the cane. And by the way, let's be honest, there are still states in America where corporal punishment is legal. And that's in a westernized country. It's horrific. So there are still teachers like that. And for me, it's how we can get the proof of that real difference in the impact on the learner. Simone, yes, please.
Ah, so I studied at the DLIT International House, where Christopher Humphreys developed an experimental method, and they taught us many different ways to be in a classroom. So, for example, they said to me, I had the diploma of DLIT International House, but they said to me I was too straight. Too straight. I wasn't perfect in this role. Yeah. Okay, that's why I asked before, is it possible to become sensitive? Because as I studied law, they said my mindset is too scaffold, can I say that? I don't know if I can say that, but anyway, did you understand what I meant? So
I did. So first,
and what about, and I wanted to ask you, what about crushing? What do you think about his theory?
Yeah.
Is it still a good theory, or, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no, Simona, and grazie mille. I personally, firstly, want to say I'm sorry that that was something that impacted you, because I think it did. When somebody says, "Oh, you're not quite," it hurts, because I actually think that as a lawyer, you have a magnificent capacity to come into rational, logical, analytical thinking. So you have a great skill. And I actually think that is a skill above being emotional, because it means that you can keep your emotions at bay. And it means you don't get dragged into the emotions of everybody else. So I actually think you have a skill there. Now, the question for me is how you can now, through the conversations, yes, you can develop that emotional point, being a very rational, logical, analytical person. Because what you're doing is saying, I know how you feel. How can we help you to move on here? How can I help you to brainstorm and troubleshoot this? Now, for me, that's compassion. And that is much more helpful and useful for the learner than actually coming into all the emotional side. So, yes, for me, that's becoming sensitive and detecting. And I do think with time and with the right way of communicating, you would then adapt more to those circumstances. One thing for all of us to remember, we have all grown up. Now, I'm at a certain age, everybody, where I'm a lot older than all of you. And those of you who are as old as I am, or nearly as old as I am, we've all grown up with those typical conservative teachers. And especially a lot of us, maybe in religious schools or in strict schools or comprehensive schools, we've grown up with systems that were very rigid. Now, when you grow up with systems like that and you become a teacher, it's natural that you are picking up things that those teachers did, and you are bringing them out without realizing, because you've adopted and adapted that through your life. When you start to learn how to coach, you start to then bring the mirror onto yourself. And that's when you start to realize, what am I saying? How am I saying it? How can I change it? If I say it this way, what impact does it have? If I say it that way, what does it have? And you start to train differently. So Simona, yes, I'm going to say yes, you can change. Now, second question, Krashen. For me, Krashen was a genius before his time because his theories came out in the 70s, the 80s, and he was shot down. Many, many times he was shot down along the way. But now we can actually really think about explicit learning, language learning, implicit learning, language acquisition. And that's what Krashen said, language learning, language acquisition. Can we go into language acquisition as an adult? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can go into immersion settings, comprehensible input. We really can learn a language, but it takes a long time. Can we learn only through explicit? Yes, we can, but it takes a long time. If we've got both, that's when we learn faster. And the effective filter, the amygdala. Now we know we've got the proof. Psychological safety is key. If we do not have psychological safety in that learning environment, our learners may be activating the sympathetic nervous system, the hypothalamic pituitary axis is kicking out all of the hormones. We've lost them. They start to block, they start to shut down, language cannot be produced. So Simona, Krashen for me was brilliant, brilliant. And now the neuroscience is marrying his theories. We're now seeing the correlation between his theories and the neuroscience and the research. Simona, does that help? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's very easy to shoot people down. But at the end of the day, I think it's about all of us embracing all the information and filtering through it. And at the end of the day, the ones who are going to be the impacted are the learners. Everything that we're doing is we're gathering all of this information to enhance the learning process, to make it work for that person. And that person might need something different to another person. So for us, it's about gathering all of this so that we have the capacity, the flexibility, and the spontaneity to use all of this to the best of our knowledge for our learners. Hermione, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I would like you to please, thank you. I have to write it down because I'm forgetful. Please tell us in a couple of sentences so that that's the last takeaway from the day. How do we again combine the cost effectiveness? I would like to learn again. I've been practicing it, and again, I would like to hear it from the horse's mouth, as opposed to this.
Calling me a horse.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm a fire horse. It's okay.
Accountability. I'm the accountability partner. I engage you. I remind you your vision and your purpose, and I enable your autonomy. But at the same time, I gently remind you that we were trying to optimize our every lesson, every session. Please tell us in 2 sentences. You weave it in a very nice way. Thank you, if you may.
It's okay. And I don't mind you calling me a horse because, as most of you know, I am a fire horse. So, and this is the fire horse year. So, the key is going to be in the way that you signpost. And your signpost is giving the messages, the clear messages that you want to bring to your learner. So right at the beginning of a session, I might be introducing the session by saying, welcome to the session today. How are you? A little bit of a warm up. And then can I share with you, I was thinking about this before we came in today, and I know you're extremely busy. And I know that when you come into my sessions, I'm really grateful for you to come in because I know how busy you are. And the one thing I was asking myself is, how can we make these sessions really cost effective for you? Because we know that, you know, if your brain's concentrating on so many different things, the multitasking, etc., might interfere with the learning. So what might you need before we start to bring in the focus to today's session? And that would be something that I would then signpost right from the beginning, Hermione.
Wouldn't this be counterproductive in the sense that I really want him, her, whoever, want them to be calm? I would like this to be the safe space. I would like them. But if I bring this cost thing at the back of my mind, it's as if at the beginning, or I remind them for as gently and may and whatever, that it's like at the back of their mind, it's this, how can I optimize this cost effective and whatever. I feel that, but at the time we are here, let's just be calm, let's just optimize the learning experience. You know where I am. It's just that it's a contradiction within myself, how to at the same time bring calm, safety, but also I would like to optimize every single minute of this session.
So as you were talking, what comes up for me is it depends on the type of client you've got. If I've got a top executive and I know that top executive is very focused on costs and time, then I wouldn't have a problem to use the word cost effective, because I know for that person, it would be magic.
Okay.
Now, if it's a different type of learner, I would probably not say cost, I would say effective.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to really make this session effective today? And then I would go into open questions. What do you need to feel safe? What do you need so that we get your brain into a calm state before we start? And even how open would you be to optimize, to talk with me about how to optimize cognitive functions? And maybe along the way, we can bring out some golden nuggets of information to optimize and enhance the learning, because everybody's different. Mm-hmm. So we could go into different conversations as we go on.
In implicit and explicit learning, and mainly the implicit that they can do during their, let's say, free time kind of thing.
There's a series of golden nugget conversations that you could bring out.
Okay.
One of them is going to be that, yes. How could you bring more implicit learning when you're not with me? That language acquisition, that subconscious input. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got what I want. Thank you. That is exactly the executive that I was talking to. Thank you for that. It served me for today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions before we close? Oh, Maria, yes, please. Beautiful to see you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for today. I want to go back to the xenoglossophobia thing. The thing is, like, have this lady contacted me, when was it? It was Thursday, I think, and we had like an initial, not even an initial session. We had like a 15-minute call, and her story is like heartbreaking. She had an brain stroke about 4 years ago, and she had to learn to walk, to talk, everything. And her neurologist basically suggested her to learn something new, right? And so she's doing this course to become like a preschool teacher. And one of the things that she wanted to do is to work on her English, because just like the thought of it makes her cry, literally makes her cry. She's tried everything, one-to-one, group, at a restaurant. And she told me how, like with traditional teaching, the teachers actually get blocked, right? When they see her cry, um, just trying to speak the language. So apparently, her neurologist commented like, why don't you try new language coaching? That's kind of like what I understood. I'll go deeper into that, but I was like, okay, I'm not going to say because this is all about her. I'm not going to
Yeah.
go into that.
Yeah.
So I was quite surprised because it's like we have the initial session tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I told her, like, okay, you don't need to prove anything. So we can use Spanish because she is Spanish. We can use
Yeah.
Spanish. And then for the mechanical goal setting, right?
Yeah.
So we'll have to go into English. I understand. So
Yeah.
I was hoping for you to give me some kind of like, should I go on about this when if she starts kind of like crying or getting like really anxious, at what time, at what point should I kind of like jump in, or I don't know if I can get some.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Maria, I'm curious, have you detected if there's been any bad learning memories?
That's what I wanted to go into. If she that was my plan, but this was like a 15-minute just to kind of go into like see if I could help her.
Yeah.
And
So I would go into that first session in Spanish.
yes.
Totally.
Okay.
So I would start her in Spanish. What is neurolanguage coaching? Your credentials, then going into the motivation, trying to get some vision. Then I might touch upon, still in Spanish, how we do the mechanical mastery, and then sort of just checking in. Can I ask you a little bit about your learning journey in English at school? How was it? What happened? And, how did you feel with it then? How old were you? And maybe just before the mechanical, just try and see if you can detect. And then you might be able to, even from what she's saying, you might be able to detect what sort of level she is. She's probably in A2. If she had, may I ask her age?
Yeah, she's in her 40s. I'd say it would be A2, B1. I'm guessing,
Right.
just trying to guess, but she learned English the way we learn here, like, yes, our
Yeah.
teachers were in Spanish. Yeah.
Exactly. So you might actually go into that empathy of, how language learning in schools was as horrendous as it was, and
Yeah.
maybe even
I
more.
did that already, yeah.
And by the way, there is one method in Spain which I wish they would shoot it down, which is tough love method, that you and I know what it's called, but we're not going to go into it. So I would check with her a little bit about the learning journey.
Before
And
going
then,
into mechanical.
yeah, and then check with her a little bit about how comfortable she would be just to play with some sentences with you, just see what comes up. And I would use a lot those words like play and see what comes out, and don't worry if nothing comes out, because we're going to create a roadmap. And if she doesn't want to go into English, then maybe then open up the discussion about, well, what grammar, can you remember what grammar areas would you like to work on, and take it from there, just down toning the speaking part, and allow her to build up that trust and connection with you from the native. And then create the roadmap with her to create the stability and the framework for the certainty. And those steps will then start to build up her trust in you and the process. And maybe even open up the space and say, with pleasure, at any point, if you want to cry, cry. Let's get those emotions out. And can I share with you, one of the best things that you can do is to label the emotions and share that research with her and get her to label them. And so I can imagine that the teachers in the past that have worked with her have never known how to deal with her. And 20 years ago, I didn't know how to deal with learners that came in and cried. But you're going to sit in that space and allow her the space to do and be whatever she wants to be. Yeah. Let me know afterwards.
Yes, I will.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you find out who the neurologist is, I will personally send him a thank you
I was
card.
like,
Yes.
yeah.
It reminds me the
Brilliant.
story. It reminds me the story of some years ago. One of our coaches had a neuroscientist as a client, and she called me up and she said, "Rachel, I'm terrified. I've got a neuroscientist as a client." And I said, "Don't panic. Just go through the first session with her. Sit with that neuroscientist. Put your hands up and say, 'Look, you're the expert. I'm just kind of coming and dipping into the research and whatever.'" The fascinating thing was this neuroscientist was going into fight or flight and couldn't speak the language. So our coach actually sat with her and said, "Look, I know you're the expert, but could we talk about fight or flight?" So she then went into fight or flight with the neuroscientist, and the neuroscientist said, "I know all of this. Of course I know. Of course, that's what's happening to me. Of course. Why didn't I realize?" And this is the point, that sometimes even when we are the expert, we don't realize. We're so good at telling everybody else things in life, but we're terrible at applying it to ourselves. And she just needed the coach to just bring the mirror to her. And that was it. So, Maria, I know that this lady is in the best hands. So let us know how you get on. Right, everybody, it's time to get on with our Saturday. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Elsa, for being here. And wishing you all a beautiful weekend. However, tomorrow morning, we do actually have a demo of patterning and phrasal verbs and all of that. So if you're wanting to have coffee with me tomorrow morning as well, 11 o'clock tomorrow, looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Shall we turn on the microphones?
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Jenny.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.